So we have Joy Proft with us today. She's currently a radio disc jockey, former business owner, and corporate executive. And I know her a little bit through working with her current husband, who is a hot farmer. And so she's the hot farmer's wife. We kind of joke about that a little bit. So I had to throw that in there.
The DJ doesn't know how to unmute. There you go. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Yeah, my husband was a farmer for 30 years, and he's not a farmer anymore. So, but he knows a lot about farming. And somehow my friend Lauren, when we first started dating, she's like, "Oh, that's a hot farmer you're dating." So it just kind of stuck. It's hilarious. His real name is Matt Proft from Someday Farm. I don't know if any of you know that farm in East Dorset, but poultry and such. So it's great to be here today. Yeah, I'm a disc jockey on WEQX. It's a radio station in Manchester that's at the corner of Highland and Elm, right near Al Ducci's. We've been around since 1984. A guy named Brooks Brown had this idea to have a radio station out of Manchester. He was an engineer type guy, loved radio, and it took him 10 years to go through all the processing, all the legalities of putting a radio station on. And our tower is on the top of Mount Equinox. And we actually lease land from the monks up there. We have a relationship that Brooks, fostered, and we're very grateful for that, having a tower on, one of the highest points in New England. So we have 50,000 watts. We broadcast throughout southern Vermont, Keene, New Hampshire, down into the Berkshires, Williamstown, over to Albany, all the way up to Lake George. So Glens Falls, Saratoga. It's scary sometimes where listeners call from. They'll be like, "I'm an hour west of Albany and I'm still getting EQX." It's like, whoa. So it's pretty cool. One of the most interesting things about the radio station is that we are still independently owned. In the music industry, like so many industries, radio, record companies, things have changed tremendously, even in the past 10 years, past 15, 20 years, with a lot of radio stations being bought out and consolidated, where you have a guy in New York City just voice tracking, and his little breaks are inserted into Buffalo, New York, and Erie, Pennsylvania, and, Delaware and wherever, because they just own all these stations and they have one guy basically sitting in a room to broadcast. But we are, live every day right out of Manchester, Vermont. So it's cool. When we had that blizzard a few weeks ago, it was a neat thing to be a part of the same weather that our listeners were all experiencing, which might sound weird, but being in the moment and having this microphone here to broadcast out, it's a pretty remarkable and a powerful thing. And especially with, our main thing is to play music. We are not a news station, but when things like COVID-19, become part of our lives, and what happened the other day, and the election and major things we do report. It's very important. We cannot, if we even show an inkling of our political feelings, the phone rings immediately. It's unbelievable. Our listeners are, no matter which way things are slanted. So you have to remember, as a broadcaster, and the fairness of, we are media, and you need to just report the news and keep moving. Our main job here is to kind of introduce people to new music and play music that they know from generations. We play music as far back as the late 70s. I host a retro lunch every day that starts at noon, Monday through Friday. And we play music from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. So if you know bands like The Cure or The Smiths, today would have been David Bowie's 74th birthday. So I played a couple songs by David Bowie today on the retro lunch. My path here is confusing, but I first moved to Vermont in 1990. I'm from Rhode Island, and grew up there. I went to Syracuse University. I always wanted to be some sort of entertainment reporter. Like, I envisioned myself being on a red carpet, which I, and kind of reporting and interviewing movie stars and whatever. I worked in radio in college. Syracuse is a really big communications school. Guys like Mike Tirico, who you see, on all the sports stuff. He's everywhere. He was a year ahead of me. I was in one class with him, and he was absolutely the glowing star. It was just amazing to be in the presence of someone. You knew he was destined for greatness. When I got out of college, I worked in radio in Providence, Rhode Island. I did sales. That's kind of a way you get into things, you don't get a job like this usually right out of college. And I learned and sold commercials on a classic rock and FM and a old time country radio AM station. That was called WHIM. So this one owner did own those two stations in Rhode Island, and I learned a lot, not only about music, but about radio and sales. And that's really that was a great launching point. I fell in love with the overnight DJ who was on the classic rock station, and he got a job at EQX, and that's how we got to Vermont. And his name was Jim McGuinn. If anybody had listened to EQX in the early 90s. We stayed here for 4 years in radio. Manchester, Vermont is on the smaller, in Albany, on the smaller market level of things. And in radio, at least back in the day, you moved up by going to bigger markets. So he got a job in St. Louis and then in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is like the 5th biggest market in the country. And St. Louis, I don't know, number 20 or something like that. Albany's probably, I don't even know, 35 or something. When you think about all the cities in the country. So when we moved to St. Louis, well, I'll back up a little bit. I did a little bit in radio here at EQX at that time. It wasn't the main part of my life, but I had other jobs. I worked at Bromley Mountain on the ski school desk, and I worked at Meadowy Mill Nursery in Dorset. And I worked at EQX a little bit. Being in your early 20s in Vermont, having 3 jobs isn't really that unusual, right? So when my ex-husband, Jim, got the job in St. Louis, I started a career for Universal Music, which is the biggest music distribution company in the world. And this was 1994. So the music landscape was very different. Back then, people bought CDs. People went to record stores. There were Tower Records, which we never had around here, but Tower Records, there were probably 5 or 10 just in New York City. There were 5 in Philadelphia. There were all over California and the big cities. Tower Records, places like Target and Best Buy. There was an account called Circuit City that had 600 locations across the country, and all of them sold CDs, in addition to electronics. So it was a very different landscape than it is now, where a lot of people consume their music by, buying a track on the new Taylor Swift single on iTunes. People bought CDs back then. So when I started working for Universal Music, that was 1994 in St. Louis, my job was basically to go around to college towns in Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska. I drove around in my white Volkswagen Golf, and I would meet the cool people that worked in all the cool record stores. And I would hang posters, and I would basically work them. I'd be like, oh, we have this new band. Not sure if anybody's familiar with the band Weezer. We have this new band Weezer, because in 1994, they were a new band. And I'd be like, can I hang some posters? Can we give away a skateboard? They're coming to Lincoln, Nebraska. Will you come to the show with me? And I basically worked the people who owned record stores, like the cool people, those cool people who knew music. That was a great introduction to just about any sort of sales job that you could have. Universal, I started out hanging posters and doing that job in St. Louis, moved on to Philadelphia. That's where ultimately Jim and I got divorced, but whatever. Jim stayed on in radio, and I stayed with Universal. And that's where I had my first real sales rep job. And I called on stores in Philadelphia, South Street, if any of you know Philly, Cherry Hill, New Jersey had a tower. And Universal being this enormous music distribution company, think of it like Anheuser-Busch of beer. There's Anheuser-Busch, which is the umbrella. And then they have Budweiser and Bud Light and, Bud Ice. Universal's the umbrella, and we had all these record labels like MCA and MCA Nashville. We had Decca Classics, we had Geffen, we had Interscope. And to trickle that down, we sold anything new or old by bands like U2 or Reba McEntire, George Strait, Andrea Bocelli. It was really, plus brand new bands that people hadn't heard of, like Weezer, like Taylor Swift. You know, it's at one point, nobody ever heard of Taylor Swift. And that was one of the new artists that we sold. And she evolved. Eminem was a really interesting record to sell at the very beginning. I think his first record came out in 1996, 7 or 8. We all know Eminem, right? Rapper out of Detroit. Probably maybe not everybody's taste, but sold a phenomenal number of records. And that taught me a lot of lessons about how sometimes you have to be a sales rep and be like, look, you just got to trust me on this one. It might not be your style, but everybody's going to buy this album. And so, you know, we really saturated the whole country with a lot of those albums. When you get an artist like Eminem or Taylor Swift, that it's kind of like a Zoom call. You know, a year ago, we didn't know what this was. And artists like that come on the market and just explode. I eventually ended up in Los Angeles with Universal, and I started out as a vice president of sales and then became a senior vice president of sales. The term, the Peter principle, I'm not sure. I'll just kind of say what that is. If people don't know, it's when you take someone who's really good at something on the ground, you know, a sales rep, and you bump them up to management, you know, so then you put them in a fancy office and you put them in meetings all day. And it's exactly what happened to me. I mean, I was delighted with the salary and the perks of being a senior vice president of a $3 billion company in the music industry. I mean, I was in, you know, Lincoln Town Cars to Grammys, and I've met went to the Grammys, went to the Grammy after parties, had car service to the airport, flew first class. But at the end of the day, you know, there's stories that come out about CEO pay or senior levels of organization, what these people get paid. I was like, it was a whole different level of work. And I learned a lot in that too. Was in the same room with a lot of very, very smart, powerful people, including Walmart. I would fly to Bentonville. There was basically a plane that went from Los Angeles to Bentonville of people who led companies in Los Angeles who had to do work in Bentonville. I mean, Bentonville, Arkansas is where Walmart is located. And that was just fascinating, learning how an organization like that works. You know, when you have an artist like Taylor Swift, you know, you want that everywhere in Walmart. And again, this is going back to the 2000s, the late 2000s. No, probably, yeah, 2006, 7, and 8. The music industry went through a huge revenue shift. People, first there was piracy. People were stealing music. You probably heard about that in the news, where, you know, people could just download music for free. I mean, back then, downloading and iPhones, that was just the very, very beginning of the digital technology. And the music industry honestly didn't adjust or didn't take it seriously. We thought that people would be buying these physical CDs forever for $15, $16. By the time we started catching up, we really, our revenue streams have been really changed. People just started paying 99 cents for one song that they could download. And so that $15 physical CD was kind of morphing. As a senior vice president of this company, here's what happens in corporate America. They're like, oh, Joy's good with people. Let's put her on the planes to close down the office in Detroit. And there was a day, like corporate America, you know, there's a day that I had to get on a plane and let go of 7 people in one day. And that was the day that I was like, I don't think this is for me. I don't have the stomach for this. And I, at that time, I was probably 42 years old. I was a female executive. I didn't think I'd get fired, which I know sounds weird, but the new world that was going to be all digital and so far away from what I knew being on the streets, hustling records, kind of, from hanging posters in Omaha and Lawrence, Kansas, to sitting in a fancy office and having to go, lay off people in one day and close offices. It was tough. The music industry had changed a bit to me. So I left in a very nice way, no complaints at all. And I moved back to Vermont from Los Angeles because Vermont was a place that I felt safe. I had still had a lot of friends when I had lived there before. I would come here on vacation. I would schedule meetings in New York on a Thursday so that I could train up to Vermont and spend the weekend here. And I could, with the time change, I could be at my desk by noon on Monday in Los Angeles. So I had that kind of figured out, and I would spend a lot of weekends in Vermont. So I moved back here in 2009, piddled around for a while. And in 2013, I opened my own business in Manchester, Vermont called Joy, All Things Under Things. I saw an opportunity to open a lingerie store with all the stores in Manchester being such a retail heavy place. I thought this was an opportunity for people who lived in Vermont, but also something that would draw people from wherever, all these, the second homeowners that were here that have second homes in Stratton or whatever people come to Southern Vermont for on vacation. I thought it would be a good add to the mix. So I owned that for 6 years. I sold it to two of my employees. I started working at EQX again after many years away, very, very part-time. And in May of last year, I got this full-time gig where I'm on Monday through Friday from 10 to 3. And I also I came up with an idea for a show called the Sunday Brunch, where I interview local business owners on Sunday from 11 to noon. How's that? Is anybody still awake? Everybody's on mute, so I see you clapping, but I can't hear you. One of the questions somebody might have, well, Joy, if you're on the air right now, how are you doing this? Technology, which helped with the shift of the music industry, helps in this case where I pre-recorded up till about 1:30. So instead of doing things live. So one hand, technology, and then the other hand, okay, it allows me to do this. So I get here about 9:45, and I start my shift at 10, and I kind of just worked a little ahead and taped some breaks.
Joey, I was just wondering, with all the new groups you're talking about, Eminem and Weezer and Taylor Swift, I'm sorry, when the next group is going to come out, it's going to be COVID-19. Do you know when that group is coming out?
I don't know when COVID-19 is going to come out, but definitely COVID-19, there are bands that weren't created before last February. There are people like in Brooklyn, we play this band Bumper, which you probably don't know if you don't listen to EQX, but it's two people who were musicians kind of in very baby bands in New York City that they were in separate bands that were kind of making their way up. And they started sharing lyrics and, vocal tracks and music, and basically created a band all online with the sharing of files, and got signed to a record label. And we started playing it on EQX in, I think, September. So definitely some of the new songs that are being created are definitely a nod to 2019, to COVID-19. I'm trying to think, there was one band. Oh, The Strokes is a band that has a big history, probably since the early 90s. And their new album is called The New Abnormal. So, music is art, right? I mean, music is art. So there's books being written, there's art being there's things being painted right now, and there's definitely music being written and that it has been inspired by this very weird time. Musicians have had to pivot. I mean, they can't just go on tour.
Right.
And here at EQX, in a business note, because at the core of it, I mean, I love talking on the air. I love all this, but I am a salesperson. Half our revenue at EQX, because our revenue comes from selling advertising, from commercials. You know, you listen to whatever radio station you listen to, you hate the commercials. Well, that's how we exist, especially independent radio. I mean, it's not like a fairy godmother's giving us money. Half our revenue came from concerts, whether it be in Rutland at the Paramount, whether it be Saratoga Performing Arts Center. You know, every time if Pearl Jam comes to SPAC, they're buying ads on EQX to sell tickets. You know, we're giving away tickets. And so all the at Albany, if anything came anywhere, Williamstown, you know, bands play at Mass Mocha, we would get advertising buys, and half our revenue just went away last March. And we've had to, you know, kind of claw our way through the year. I mean, fortunately, we have this great legacy, being around since 1984 and having a very active kind of lifestyle audience. Our audience is probably people like me that or Sarah, you know, I don't know, I don't want to, but we hike, we ski, we have gardens, so we've gone other places. So it's actually made us a stronger staff, I think, because we don't just have a concert SPAC to rely on, even to just talk about, you know.
I felt it was really important to mention that in addition to the illustrious career that you described, which sounds awesome, you've also done tremendous good for this community in your volunteer work. And I just wanted to say what a pleasure it was working with you, the efforts you did with the Manchester Business Association, and then later as one of the inaugural Chamber of Commerce directors and the newly Regional Chamber of Commerce. It was really valuable having you there in that transition, having your voice for the community and our region as a whole. And I just wanted to share how grateful I am personally, and also what a service you did to the community as a whole in that. And also, I love your Sunday brunch. So I just wanted to say all that.
Thank you. Well, that the Sunday brunch, thank you for all that. You know, being a business owner, helping out the community it comes hand in hand. You know, so I did enjoy my time there and did a lot of stuff with the Komen organization, helped sponsor things like that, various other nonprofits. You're welcome. I forgot what else I was going to say about that, but the Sunday brunch. Well, that was when we realized that the music revenue was going away. You know, SPAC. I mean, SPAC spent a lot of money with this radio station. You know, Albany, something comes to the Egg, the Palace. I mean, we have a coffee house. So if some sort of, guy with a guitar that we love was coming playing at the Egg for some intimate performance, we'd get a buy on that. And so the program director said, if anybody has any ideas on how to drive revenue. So the Sunday brunch, business owners or some representative from businesses, and we've had them from Southern Vermont. In Bennington, we had the Couch and Cork, that new company, which came out of COVID, an idea. We've had Mass Mocha on. We've had out of Albany, this cookie company that two women own. We've had Toad Flax Nursery, which is in Glens Falls. We've had North Shore Bookstore. So it's $450. You know, knowing a little bit about sales and stuff, I tried to make it affordable, maybe the cost of a print ad that you'd put in Strat magazine or something to make it relative to other costs. You get 10 commercials on EQX. You get to come on the air with me. We talk 5 times between 11 and noon on Sundays. Plus, starting on Thursdays leading up to that Sunday brunch on the air, we're saying, oh, this Sunday on the brunch, Joy has Chris Morrow from the North Shore Bookstore on the air. There's another new business in Bennington that was on My Generation Vintage. A young woman named Sarah started this business and is really trying. So it's been a neat opportunity, and it enables people to come on the air and talk about what they do. Nobody talks about their business better than they do, and it's an investment. Everybody has a marketing budget. I mean, you have to. You can't just rely on Facebook and Instagram to promote your business. I mean, they're great, but it's not a true marketing plan, you know?
Hey, can I follow up and mention, I've met your husband and he is a hunk.
We met at a Stratton Foundation. Well, he saw me at a Stratton Foundation event up in the base lodge up at Stratton for the Vermont, raise money for the Taste of Vermont, which was a fundraising event. And I was helping out my friend Amy Chamberlain, who now owns a food truck in Manchester called Amy's on the Road. And she owned The Perfect Wife for over 20 years and closed that a couple years ago. And I was helping her out one night, and that's where the hot farmer first spotted me. So yeah, I lucked out there, and all the kids.
So, Joy,
Yeah.
what's the prognosis for COVID? It seems to me like in about 6 months, hopefully, most of us will have the vaccine and it will be going away. So do you think it's going to go back to the life that it was?
You mean with concerts?
Yeah, I mean, outdoor stuff, group stuff.
Well, I don't. I mean, I say that because what if the scenario is before you can go into the gates of this concert, you have to have proof that you had the vaccine, or we got to take your temperature every time you walk into this concert. I mean, I think it's going to be radically, I think large gatherings are going to be radically different. In Europe, in Germany, they've done some tests. They put like gloves on people and had them attend a concert sitting far apart from each other. You know, there were volunteers for this, and they had put some sort of dye or something on the gloves just to see how things would, the virus travels with a band playing on stage. And if you sit on the front row, and the lead singer sweats on you or whatever. I mean, I think it's going to be different. There's one band that we play called the Flaming Lips. They're out of Oklahoma. They've also been around since the early 90s. They did a concert where they gave a certain number of people, a small number, literally these bubbles to go in. So you went in this concert and you were enclosed in a bubble, and the band was in in bubbles. And they tried to see if that was a good idea or a different idea. So bands are trying, but imagine, it's not just our revenue here at the radio station. I mean, SPAC, all the people that work there, they had no jobs last summer. The track, that's not even music, the track, the raceway, all the people that cash your tickets in and stuff. I mean, all the jobs. Then the people who work with bands, the people who run the lights, the people who drive the vans for Reba McEntire when she goes on tour. I mean, it's the trickle down in just the music industry is enormous. So I don't know where it's going, but I don't know. Right now, it's hard for me to say that I would feel comfortable sitting in those little chairs. Those chairs seem smaller now at the movie theater, at SPAC. Everything, doesn't it seem? And my blanket on the lawn at SPAC seems different. So I don't think it will go back to where it was. I don't know what it's going to be, but
a quick follow, kind of a related question there is over-the-air radio. I mean, do you think EQX? I shouldn't ask you to say anything about EQX necessarily, but just in general, over-the-air radio towers, are they going to be as kind of obsolete as telegraph machines pretty soon? I mean, and what's the future of radio station in the country?
Well, yeah, an independently owned radio station. We are extremely rare, especially with the format we have. I mean, in the country, there used to be a lot more stations like EQX. We're staunch about not letting anybody buy us out. Maybe to a fault, we don't know. Streaming, a lot of people, have their satellite radio in their cars. Sometimes cars, it's easier to listen to satellite radio than it is to find the actual radio. We have an app. So in addition to our regular broadcast via the tower, we have a WEQX app where people can go to the app store, download the EQX app, and you can listen to the same, it's the same stuff. I think there's a little delay. It's the exact same, what I say on the air, broadcasting out through our EQX app, and also smart speakers. Like if you have Alexa, we've gone onto that. So if you say, "Hey Alexa, play WEQX," it will play it. So I mean, we've had to get with the times. I mean, I hope not. I think it's important to have live people on the ground, especially with like I said, news, weather, relevant. I mean, imagine. I mean, Vermont is such a unique place. You know, imagine if somehow we just get our news fed from another place, and with satellite radio, I hope that I think there's a lot of promise. I think people want to be entertained by a real human. You know, I think I've listened to Pandora. I know what XM's all about. I think Howard Stern is an incredible disc jockey, and I don't have satellite radio, but I would listen to it if I had it. But I think there is something special about radio. It's the initial form of media, of communication. You know, people listen to farm reports and got their huddled by the radio. So I think this has actually brought a nostalgic kind of thing with radio back. I can feel it. And with the streaming and Alexa, people listen to us every day from Florida, California, Michigan, over in Europe. I have a guy who emails me from Switzerland. My friend who lives in Manchester had an exchange student from Germany who was here, went to BBA, fell in love with EQX, couldn't believe it, and streams us in Germany. So every day I come on here, I think of the opportunity, not just in Southern Vermont and our broad range of Lake George, Saratoga, Albany, Williamstown, Keene, New Hampshire, but I think of all these people that I am enlightening about Vermont. I mean, we had that snowstorm. People listen to us in Florida. You know, they're hearing about my commute to work, which was so crazy. And they'll email me. Okay, I love gardening. I love birds, and maybe this is a good place. I don't know, but so I've always loved gardening and blah, blah, blah. So I talk about the gardens. I talk about my garden all summer. Oh my God! Emails, calls, people calling in. Let me tell you what's going on in my garden. You know, everybody's eggplant. It comes in the same day. You know, it's something that's happening that day, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do with all this eggplant?" You know, so you talk about that on the radio, and people are like, "Me too. I have this good recipe. Here it is." Da da da. I've been talking about birds. Yesterday, I did a whole thing about cardinals because I love bird watching, and today I talked about the mourning dove. And every morning I come in prepared with entertainment stories. Not about, Blake Shelton and Gwen Stefani are getting married, but just kind of relevant what's going on in the world. I mean, right now, if you have, the birds are amazing. There's snow on the ground and it's a cardinal comes to your bird feeder. Everybody gets excited about that. So I try to think of what topical, what can I be relatable right now, especially because on a station like this, we play so much new music that we have to spoon feed. It's like, okay, Joy's going to talk about birds at 11:30. That I can latch on to. I mean, yesterday I talked about cardinals. I had 2 in my backyard yesterday. A listener emailed me. He had 8 cardinals in his yard yesterday. This listener from Glens Falls. Send me a picture. I mean, people are like, nobody listens to the radio. I'm like, I could show you every day. People listen to the radio. Not only that, they like email me pictures from their backyard, you know? So I have hope because I love doing this. I love being in the same moment. As everybody else. And when news comes on the news, like it did on, what day was that? The longest evening of our life, Wednesday. Having to report stuff like that is a huge responsibility that I hope never goes away, you know? So.
Well, just the ability to track who's listening. I mean, imagine when you're just broadcasting from a tower, you're assuming people are listening,
right.
But I mean, that must be a boon for the advertising, knowing exactly where your voice is going to and how many people are listening at any time.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Technology again, I mean, with streaming and then it gets kind of scary, right? Because with all this digital stuff, I mean, if you have Spotify or Pandora or Amazon, I mean, all those digital companies, you're like this little bit of information and they're all using it to then market towards you. So yeah, we can. So that helps in sales because in radio, I don't know. When I'm on the air, I often think, you know, when I drive to Albany for whatever reason, and you drive through those lights in Troy, and I look around and I see all those cars like the big Stewart's there and all that traffic. I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea who's listening to me on the radio. I remember in college, that actually really scared me. Like, that's kind of why I wanted to do like sales. I liked because I like this where I can see the people, I can see you, you know. But radio, you're right. It's like thin air, like, but people responding to what we do, you know, people, an advertiser comes on and people go buy something and say, oh, I heard about you on EQX. The Sunday brunch has been great for that. This cookie company called Cookie Therapy came on in Albany. These cookies ain't cheap, I'll tell you. And they ain't small either. They're like these huge cookies. A listener called me, she says, I never thought I would spend $50 on cookies, but I heard this on your radio. I heard you talking to them. And so I went and bought, and, you know, they had an EQX discount code. So you can track it that way. It's interesting stuff. Thanks, Dana. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, no, local radio builds local communities. So,
yeah.
Sarah?
I just had a comment before Joy has to, it's almost 1:30 before she has to go back. Thank you so much, Joy. I wanted to learn more about you, and this is awesome. I've learned so much. I feel like we just touched the iceberg, so I want to chat at some point, but thank you. This is great.
Thank you. Well, my dad, the best advice I ever got was success is based on your ability to adjust. So I kind of remember that every day. Thanks, Sarah.
All right, Joy, thank you very much for spending a little time with us.
Great. This is great. Thank you all for what you do.